I never imagined I'd see her again. After everything that happened, I didn't think our paths would ever cross. But here I was, standing in the middle of a wedding, and there she was, Mave Donovan, for years. That's how long it's been since I last saw her, heard her voice, felt that undeniable pull between us. For years of trying to move on, pretending that what I did didn't matter. But the moment I stepped into that ballroom, the moment I saw her across the room, I knew I was lying to myself all along. She was standing there, looking just as stunning as I remembered. The same fiery red hair, the same piercing eyes that always seemed to see right through me. She was wearing a simple black dress, elegant, understated, but somehow still impossible to ignore. I hadn't seen her in so long, and yet, the moment I locked eyes with her, I was right back there, in that place we used to be. But I wasn't sure if she even recognized me. She didn't seem to react at first, as if she were too busy with the event around her to notice the ghost from her past standing in the doorway. I felt my chest tighten as I made my way toward her. For a moment, I hesitated. Could I do this? Could I face her, knowing everything I'd done? But before I could stop myself, my feet were carrying me closer. When I was about 5 steps away from her, she turned and met my gaze. Her expression was unreadable, but I saw the brief flicker of recognition in her eyes before she masked it with her usual cold composure. She raised her glass of champagne to her lips, her hand steady, not betraying the tension in the air between us. "Mave," I said softly, just her name, as if saying it would make everything better, or at least make the weight of the past feel lighter. But I knew better. The words hung in the air like an apology I didn't deserve to give. Her response was a small nod, but her lips didn't form a smile. There was nothing warm in her gaze, just the same quiet strength that I remembered, a strength that had made me fall in love with her. "Congratulations on the Westbrook merger," she said, her voice cool, smooth like nothing had changed. But I knew better. I could hear the edge in her tone, the slight tremor in her hand as she set the glass down. She was still carrying the weight of everything that had happened between us, and I knew it, even if she didn't speak it aloud. "Thank you," I replied, my voice a little hoarser than I intended. "I hear it's revolutionizing the industry. Quite a thing to be a part of." She looked at me, and for a brief second, I saw a flicker of something regret. Maybe, or something deeper, something I hadn't seen in years. But it was gone almost as soon as it appeared. She straightened her back, her posture perfect, a defense mechanism I had seen too many times. She was shielding herself from me, from the man who had abandoned her. "I hear your company's expanding globally," she said, almost too casually, as if she were reading from a script. But I knew she wasn't interested in the merger or the expansion. She was just making small talk, the kind you make when you've run out of real things to say to someone you used to love. Someone who walked away from you without a second thought. Her eyes, those amber eyes that once looked at me with so much love, now seemed distant, detached. She wasn't the same person she had been when we first met. And I realized neither was I. But the thing was, I couldn't stop looking at her. "So," she said, cutting through the silence, her voice steady, "what have you been up to? How's everything?" The question felt strange, like a formality. The truth was, I hadn't been doing much of anything worthwhile since the day I left her. Sure, I'd built Kingsley Enterprises into what it was today, but none of that felt real. None of it mattered in this moment. Not when she was standing here in front of me, and all I could think about was how I had left her behind, how I'd abandoned her when she needed me the most. But I wasn't ready to admit that. Not yet. I've been busy, I said, keeping my answer vague, giving her the same sort of cold, professional response she was giving me, just adjusting to the new role. It's been a lot of work. I watched her carefully. She nodded, the kind of nod that said she wasn't really interested in my answer, but she was too polite to dismiss me completely. I see, she said, her voice neutral. Well, it's good to see you again, Asha. Good to see me again. Those words felt like a slap to my face, like a reminder of all the things I had done wrong. She wasn't angry with me anymore. She had moved past that, or so it seemed. But she hadn't forgiven me, not in the way I wanted, not in the way I needed. You look the same, I said, my voice faltering as I tried to find something, anything, to say that would bridge the gap between us. But it was too late. The distance was too great. You look like you've seen a ghost, she said, her lips curving into a dry, humorless smile. Perhaps I have. The ghost of the man I thought you were, she added, almost too softly for me to hear, but I did. And it hit me harder than anything else she could have said. Her words stung. They pierced through the facade I had built around myself, and for the first time in years, I realized just how much I had hurt her, how much I had destroyed. I didn't know what else to say. I wanted to apologize, but the words felt too small, too weak for everything I had done. Instead, I just stood there, staring at her, hoping somehow, some way, she would understand. Nothing, she said finally, breaking the silence. It's ancient history, but I could see it in her eyes. It wasn't ancient history. It was still there, just below the surface. The pain, the betrayal, the anger, all of it was still there, buried deep inside her, and she wasn't ready to let it go. And honestly, I didn't know if I was ready to face it either. For a moment, we stood there, two people who once meant everything to each other, now strangers in the same room. The years had changed us. The time apart had broken us in ways I wasn't sure could ever be repaired. Perhaps we should go inside, she said, her tone shifting back to that professional, distant voice. The wedding's about to start. We wouldn't want to miss it. I nodded, my mind still racing, trying to make sense of everything I had just heard. But I didn't follow her inside right away. Instead, I stood there, watching her disappear into the crowd, knowing that, for better or for worse, our past was behind us, and that everything we had was gone. Back then, when I stepped into Mave Donovan's life, I didn't know I was walking into something I couldn't control. It wasn't just about business. It became something much more personal, something I wasn't ready for. Our first meeting wasn't anything special at first. I was just the CEO of Kingsley Enterprises, and she was the talented architect we had hired to work on an ambitious project. I didn't expect to get caught up in the whirlwind that would follow. But when Mave spoke, when she made those sharp observations, something in me shifted. She was composed, confident, everything I thought I wanted in an employee. And then something changed. I started looking at her not just as a professional. I saw the fire in her eyes, the sharpness in her words, and I felt the pull of something I hadn't anticipated. I never expected it to happen this way. I never expected her to become the focal point of everything, something I couldn't control, something I didn't know I needed. Our first meeting was in a conference room, with several models of the new headquarters scattered across the table. Mave was presenting her ideas, brilliant, innovative, and ahead of its time. She spoke with such authority, but there was a vulnerability to her, an openness beneath her professional exterior that I couldn't ignore. That was the moment I realized she wasn't just an architect. She was someone with a depth I wanted to understand. "Miss Donovan," I said, after she had finished explaining one of her concepts, "I'm impressed. Your ideas are not just functional, but visionary." She didn't smile, didn't take the praise easily. "Thank you. But vision without practicality is useless. My job is to find the balance between the two," she replied, her tone as composed as her appearance. Her words struck me. She didn't settle for mediocrity. She wasn't the type to accept things just because they worked on paper. She wanted to make sure they worked in the real world, in a way that mattered. We spent hours discussing plans, challenges, and opportunities. I couldn't help but be captivated. Her intelligence, her passion for architecture, it was magnetic. She challenged me, questioned me, and in turn, I found myself questioning my own assumptions. I realized that the connection between us wasn't just professional. It was personal. At the end of that meeting, I was still unsure about how to handle the situation. I wasn't supposed to get close to someone like her. I was the son of Roland Kingsley. I had responsibilities, and yet, when she smiled at me, when she said goodbye, I felt something shift inside me. Something that hadn't been there before. A week later, I invited her to dinner. It wasn't supposed to be anything personal. It was supposed to be business, just another discussion about the project over a quiet meal. But as we sat across from each other, talking about architecture, the conversation somehow drifted. I realized how easy it was to talk to her about more than just work. She didn't just care about the project. She cared about ideas, about the bigger picture, about making something meaningful. And that was something I hadn't expected. "I don't usually mix business with personal," she said, when I suggested we have dinner outside of work. I appreciated her honesty. I respected it. But I wasn't ready to let this opportunity slip by. Not yet. "I understand, but the offer stands. If you want to continue our conversation, I'm open to it," I said, smiling at her. There was something in her that intrigued me, something I couldn't let go of. She hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Okay, but it's just about the project, right?" "Of course," I said, though we both knew it was more than that. And so it began. Our dinners continued, one after another. What started as a professional discussion grew into something else. We found ourselves discussing our lives, our losses, the things that shaped us. I told her about my mother, how she had passed when I was 12, and how that loss had affected everything I did. Mave shared the story of her own mother, a literature professor who passed away from cancer. There was something about those conversations, about our shared pain, that made me feel closer to her, more connected than I had ever expected. One evening, after we had spent hours talking, I realized just how much I had come to depend on these conversations with her. It was a feeling I couldn't quite explain. It wasn't just the intellectual connection, but something deeper. She understood me in a way no one else ever had. "Mave," I said, my voice low. As we stood outside the restaurant, the cool night air wrapping around us, "There's something about you. You're different from anyone I've ever met." She turned to me, eyes sharp, but also soft. "I think you're different to Asher. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing." "I'm not who I used to be," I admitted. It was a rare moment of honesty. I didn't like to show vulnerability, but with her, I felt like I could. And yet, I still hadn't told her the whole truth about why I had pushed so hard for the CEO position, why I had shut everyone out. She didn't know the fear that drove me, the pressure from my father to live up to the legacy of the Kingsley name. It wasn't that I didn't care about her. I did. But I couldn't let go of the dream I had of being the man my father had always wanted me to be. She didn't answer right away, just stood there as if processing everything I had said. Then, finally, she spoke. I can't say I fully understand, but I know what it's like to want something so badly that you forget what matters in the process. Her words hit me hard. They were too close to the truth. I had spent so long trying to build an empire, trying to prove myself to my father and to the world, that I hadn't seen the damage it was causing to the people who mattered most. I'm sorry, I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. She gave a small smile, one that seemed like it was meant to reassure me, but I could see the sadness in her eyes. You don't have to apologize, Asha. We all make mistakes. But some mistakes, once made, can't be fixed. And some things, once lost, can't be found again. I didn't know how to respond to that. She was right, of course. I had lost her once. And now, standing here, I couldn't help but feel that I was on the verge of losing her again. But I wasn't ready to give up, not just yet. I know, I said, looking at her with more certainty than I had felt in a long time. But I'm not going to give up on this. On us. She didn't reply. Instead, she simply looked at me, her expression unreadable. But in her eyes, I saw something. A flicker of hope, perhaps. Or maybe it was just pity. Either way, it didn't matter. I had made my choice, and I would fight for her. For whatever this was between us, the next few weeks were a blur of meetings, work, and quiet dinners. Each one with Mave felt more meaningful than the last. We had both started to let down our guards, to reveal the parts of ourselves we kept hidden from the world. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally getting something right. But there was still so much I hadn't told her. And deep down, I knew that until I faced those truths, until I dealt with the fear and the pressure I had been carrying for so long, we could never truly move forward. I just didn't know if I was ready to face them. But I couldn't wait forever. I had to make a choice, and I was going to make it soon. Asterisk. The weeks following that dinner felt like a dream, both exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. I found myself thinking about Mave in a way I hadn't expected. There was a pull between us that felt undeniable, something that went beyond our professional relationship and beyond our shared moments of vulnerability. Every time we spoke, every time we met, I felt a little more of myself slipping away into something more real, something I wasn't sure I was ready for. But no matter how much I fought it, no matter how hard I tried to remind myself of the importance of my role at Kingsley Enterprises, I couldn't help but feel more and more drawn to her. In the early days of our conversations, I was able to compartmentalize everything, work on one side, Mave on the other. It was easier that way. But now, everything was blending together. I wasn't sure where my professional life ended and my personal feelings for Mave began. We'd meet after hours, go to quiet, low-key restaurants where the noise of the world could fade away, and we'd talk about architecture, about life, about things we had never shared with anyone else. She told me about her mother's death, the struggle of losing someone so important at such a young age, and how it shaped the way she approached the world. I told her about my mother, how her passing had shaped me, too, and the burden of living up to my father's expectations. The vulnerability I felt in those moments was something I hadn't allowed myself to experience in years. It was easier to hide behind my role as the CEO of Kingsley Enterprises, to focus on the company and the legacy my father had built. But with Mave, I couldn't do that. She made me confront parts of myself that I'd long buried under layers of corporate ambition. The tension between us, however, wasn't just emotional. It was physical too. We both felt the magnetic pull whenever we were together. The brief touches, the lingering glances, the way our conversations would always end with a moment of hesitation, as if neither of us wanted to break the fragile spell we'd woven between us. I tried to push it down, tried to convince myself that this was just a professional connection, nothing more. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. I could feel it something deeper, something more real. One evening, I found myself standing at her apartment door, just moments before I knocked. I had told myself this was just another business dinner, but the moment I saw her, the moment we began talking, it was clear it was anything but business. There was an intensity in her gaze that matched my own, a silent understanding between us that had been building ever since we first met. "Mave," I said, my voice a little more raw than I intended. But I stopped myself before I could finish the sentence. There was something more I wanted to say, something that had been building for weeks, but I couldn't bring myself to say it. I didn't know how. She didn't speak immediately. She just stood there, her expression softening, as if she understood exactly what I was trying to say, but didn't want to hear it. She didn't want to hear it because we both knew the truth. We both knew the consequences of what I was about to say. "I don't think we should keep doing this," she finally said, breaking the silence. It was quiet, but her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I knew what she meant, but hearing it out loud still shocked me. "What do you mean?" I asked, barely managing to keep my voice steady. The thought of losing her, of walking away from something I had only just begun to explore, made my chest tighten. "We're playing with fire," she said, her voice tinged with the exhaustion of someone who had tried to keep things under control for too long. "Asher, you're the CEO of Kingsley Enterprises. You're always going to be tied to that. You've got responsibilities, a future that doesn't leave room for ... someone like me." I felt the words hit me, and for the first time, I understood what she meant. She was right. I had been so focused on building the company, on living up to my father's expectations, that I had forgotten to leave room for anything else. I had treated Mave like a distraction, something to keep me entertained, when all along she had been something more, something real, and I hadn't been fair to her. "I don't know what to say," I admitted. The weight of my mistakes pressed down on me. "I've been so focused on the wrong things, Mave. I didn't mean for this to happen. But I can't deny that I care about you." She looked away, her eyes glistening with something close to tears. "I care about you too, Asher, but that doesn't change anything. I can't let myself get caught up in something that isn't going to work. I won't let myself." I stood there, my mind racing. I wanted to say more. I wanted to tell her that I could change, that I could be the man she needed, but I knew it wasn't that simple. It wasn't that easy. We were too different, too many things between us had gone unsaid. And now I felt like I was on the brink of losing her completely. A few days later, I was in my office, going over the plans for the new headquarters, when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but something about the moment made me pick it up. "Asher." It was Mave. Her voice was shaky, and for the first time, I could hear the vulnerability in her tone. "Mave." I answered, sitting up straighter in my chair. "What's wrong?" I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't keep pretending that everything is fine when it's not. I need to let go." My heart sank as the words hit me. I knew what she was saying. She was walking away. She was finally letting go of the connection we had, and I was powerless to stop it. "I'm sorry, Mave," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "I never should have let it get this far. I never should have put you through this." She was silent for a moment, and then I heard her say something that almost broke me. "I'm not the one you need to apologize to," she said. "You need to apologize to yourself. You need to figure out what you want before it's too late. You've got a lot of things to work through, Asha, and I'm not going to be the one who holds you back." With that, she hung up. The words she left me with lingered in the air long after the call ended. You need to apologize to yourself. It was the first time I'd ever considered the possibility that the real problem wasn't Mave, or the company, or my father. It was me. I had to fix myself before I could ever fix anything else. I sat there in my office, alone, as the weight of it all pressed down on me. The pain of losing Mave, of watching something beautiful slip through my fingers, was overwhelming. But it was also a wake-up call. I had pushed everything and everyone aside in my quest for success, and now I was paying the price. Days passed. I threw myself into work, burying myself in the projects that were piling up on my desk, but nothing helped. No matter how much I focused on the company, no matter how many hours I worked, I couldn't stop thinking about her. I couldn't stop wishing I had done things differently. But it was too late now. Mave was gone. She had made her choice, and I was left with nothing but the hollow ache of regret. The days after Mave and I parted ways were nothing short of a blur. I threw myself into the work at Kingsley Enterprises with the kind of reckless abandon I hadn't allowed myself before. I buried my guilt, my confusion, and my regret under piles of paperwork and endless meetings. It was easier that way, wasn't it? Easier to focus on what I knew, on what I could control. The company, the legacy, the future. But no matter how hard I tried to push her out of my mind, no matter how many tasks I threw myself into, Mave's absence was always there, lurking in the background, gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. I couldn't stop thinking about her, about how things had ended, how I'd let her slip through my fingers. It didn't matter how much I pretended that I was fine, that I was moving on. The truth was, I wasn't. I remember the first time I tried to reach out to her after we broke up. It was just a few weeks later. I convinced myself that it was a simple gesture, a casual text, or a call to check in. But when I picked up the phone and stared at the screen, I couldn't bring myself to hit send. What could I possibly say? "I'm sorry." That word felt too small, too empty for the magnitude of what I had done. What was I even apologizing for anymore? The fact that I had left her, the fact that I had put my career ahead of her, ahead of us. Instead, I did nothing, and that nothing stretched out for days, then weeks. Each day was like walking through fog ray, heavy and filled with uncertainty. I kept going, kept pretending that I had everything under control, that everything would be fine. But it wasn't, and it never would be. At work, I threw myself into the expansion projects, the mergers, the new ventures that seemed to keep piling up one after the other. But no matter how many meetings I sat in, how many contracts I signed, there was always a part of me that was somewhere else. My mind would drift to Mave, to the way her eyes had looked when we last spoke, to the finality in her voice when she said she needed to let go. I couldn't stop thinking about the life we might have had, the one I destroyed in pursuit of something that now seemed utterly meaningless. The first real crack came when I was reviewing designs for the new headquarters and I saw her name on one of the documents. Mave Donovan. She had been working on the preliminary design before we broke up, and here I was, holding her work in my hands. For the briefest moment, I wondered if she would have wanted to see it through, if she would have wanted to be a part of my life, of this company that now felt like a cage. But I had no right to ask that. I had pushed her away, and in doing so, I had shut myself out of her life. I didn't try to reach out again. Instead, I buried myself deeper in work, hoping that the more I did, the less I would have to feel. But the longer I went without seeing her, without hearing from her, the more I began to realize how much I had taken her for granted. How much I had taken everything for granted. I had convinced myself that success and achievement were the most important things, but now, standing alone at the top, I felt empty, hollow, like I had sacrificed everything for something that didn't matter. The holidays came and went, and with them, more silence between Mave and me. I didn't attend any of the social events she might have been at. I didn't want to see her, not because I didn't care, but because I was terrified of what would happen if I did. I wasn't ready for the conversation. I wasn't ready for the confrontation, and I wasn't sure I could bear the reality of how badly I had messed things up. I don't know why it took so long, but eventually the silence became unbearable. There was a part of me that knew I couldn't keep running from this, from the mistakes I had made. I needed closure, even if I wasn't sure what that would look like. So, one night, when I was back at my apartment, alone, I found myself staring at my phone again. I stared at it for a long time, just holding it in my hands, unsure if I should make the call or not. But I did, Mave, I said, my voice hoarse when she finally answered. It's Asha. I know it's been a while. I needed to hear your voice. There was a long pause before she spoke, and when she did, her voice was guarded. What do you want, Asha? I don't know. Maybe just to talk, I said, trying to keep the desperation from creeping into my voice. About everything. About ... us. I think we've said everything we need to, don't you? She replied, the distance in her voice like a wall I couldn't climb over. I don't think there's anything left to say. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words settle over me. I knew what she meant. I had abandoned her, and now I was trying to claw my way back into her life when I had no right to. I know, I said quietly. I've been a mess, Mave. I've been trying to pretend that I could just keep going, that I didn't need to fix this. But the truth is, I miss you. I miss everything about you. I don't know how to make it right, but I just wanted you to know that. She was silent for a moment, and I wondered if she was about to hang up. But then she spoke again, her voice softer this time, though still distant. Asha, I don't know if you can fix this. I don't know if we can fix this. You made your choice, and so did I. I'm sorry, I said again, the words feeling so small, so inadequate for what I had done. But I had to say them. I can't take back what I did, but I need you to know that I didn't mean to hurt you. I never wanted to hurt you. I know, she replied, her voice thick with emotion, though she quickly masked it. But I need to move on. We both do. We both fell silent after that, neither of us knowing what to say. I didn't know if I should say goodbye, if I should hang up the phone. But I didn't want to lose her again, not like this. I understand, I finally said, my voice barely a whisper, but I'll always be here. If you ever need me. I hung up, the finality of the conversation crashing over me like a wave. And, for the first time in a long time, I felt completely and utterly alone in the days that followed. I realized something I hadn't been able to face until now. I had been running from myself. Running from the fear of not living up to expectations, of failing in the eyes of my father, of letting my career slip away. But in doing so, I had lost the one thing that mattered most, Mave, and now I had no idea how to get her back. My work became a blur. The projects piling up, the meetings feeling like endless loops that I couldn't escape. I threw myself into everything I could control, hoping it would drown out the growing ache in my chest. But nothing could fill the emptiness. It wasn't just the loss of Mave. It was the realization that I had spent so much of my life chasing something that didn't matter. I had sacrificed real connections for success, for power, for the approval of a man who would never be satisfied with anything less than perfection. And in the process, I had destroyed the only thing that had ever felt real. The months dragged on. I tried to move on. I tried to find peace in my work, in my status, in the things I could control. But the truth was, I wasn't moving on at all. I was just surviving. Weeks passed, and I thought I had finally learned how to move forward, how to bury the past under the weight of my responsibilities. But every moment, every day, Mave lingered in my mind, like a ghost that refused to leave. I couldn't shake the memory of her face, the way her eyes had looked at me with a mixture of pain, anger, and resignation. I couldn't escape the echo of her words, the finality in her voice when she told me we were done. I had told myself that I could survive this, that I could bury everything and move on, but I was wrong. I wasn't living. I was existing. Then, one afternoon, everything changed. I was standing in my office, reviewing the latest design drafts for the Kingsley headquarters, when I got an unexpected call. It was from an unfamiliar number. I hesitated for a moment, but something told me I couldn't let it go to voicemail. Asher. Mave's voice crackled through the phone. I froze. The sound of her voice, after all this time, sent a wave of emotions crashing through me. I hadn't expected to hear from her. Not after everything. Not after I had walked away and then let her walk away from me. I asked, my voice trembling slightly. I could hear her take a deep breath on the other end of the line before she spoke again. I don't know how to say this, she started, her voice uncharacteristically quiet, as though she was struggling to find the right words. But we need to talk. I felt a pang of hope, followed immediately by a rush of fear. My heart was racing. I had spent months wishing for this moment, hoping for it, praying for it, and now that it was here, I didn't know if I was ready. The fear of what this conversation might bring gripped me tightly, but I couldn't back away. Not now. Not when I finally had a chance to fix what I had broken. I'm listening, I said, trying to steady my breath. My hands were shaking. I've been carrying something with me, she continued. Something I should have told you a long time ago. I didn't want to hurt you, Asher, but now I think you need to know the truth. I felt my heart skip a beat, the weight of her words pressing down on me. What truth? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I braced myself for whatever she was about to say, but nothing could have prepared me for the words that followed. I was pregnant, she said, her voice barely audible. When we broke up, when I tried to reach you, I was carrying our child. I lost the baby after you left. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I didn't know what to say. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as everything I thought I knew about our past, about our separation, suddenly shattered. I hadn't been ready for this, hadn't been ready to hear that the life I had abandoned had been so much more complicated than I ever realized. 1,000 thoughts flooded my mind, and yet I couldn't find the words to respond. I didn't know, I finally managed to say, the truth of my ignorance hitting me like a cold wave. Mave, I never knew. I know, she replied quietly. I never told you. I thought you had already walked away from me, and I didn't want to burden you with something else. I was trying to move on, I couldn't be the one to hold on when you had already let go. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear her soft breathing on the other end of the line, the weight of everything between us. I had thought I had let go of her, but I hadn't. I had been lying to myself. I had never let go of her. I had just convinced myself that I could live without her. I'm so sorry, I said, the words feeling so small, so inadequate in comparison to the enormity of what we had both been through. I didn't know, Mave. I can't even begin to imagine what you must have felt. She let out a small, humorless laugh. You don't have to imagine, Asha. I went through it alone. I lost our child alone. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of her pain pressing down on me. It was a pain I had caused, a pain I could never undo, no matter how many apologies I gave. I know, I said quietly. I should have been there for you. I should have stayed. I'm sorry I wasn't. There was a long pause before she spoke again. I don't know what's going to happen now, Asha. I'm not sure what I even want. I just thought you should know. That's all. I understand, I said, my voice breaking. I understand more than you know. I wish I could have been there for you. I wish I could change everything. We both fell silent, the weight of the years between us heavy in the air. There was so much left unsaid, so much left unresolved. But at least now, I finally knew the truth. And that truth was enough to shake me to my core. I'll always care about you, Mave, I said finally, my voice raw. And if you ever need anything, if you ever want to talk or, I don't know, just be heard, I'll be here, always. I know, she replied softly. But right now, I think we both need some time to heal. Some space, I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I understand. Take care of yourself, Mave. The call ended, and I sat there, the silence enveloping me. The truth had come out, but it didn't feel like a resolution. It felt like a beginning of a new chapter for both of us. But whether that chapter would be together or apart, I didn't know. It's strange, isn't it? How life moves forward, even when we think we're stuck in the past. Even when we're holding on to regrets, lost moments, and things that can never be undone. Time keeps moving, and we either move with it or we get left behind. I don't know what's going to happen next. I don't know if Mave and I will ever find our way back to each other. Maybe we will. Maybe we won't. But I do know this. Things will never be the same. We can never go back to what we had. But maybe, just maybe, we can move forward separately or together. I used to think success was all that mattered. That building an empire, living up to my father's expectations, that was the end goal. But now, I'm not so sure. I've spent so many years focusing on the wrong things, ignoring the people who mattered most, chasing a legacy that never truly mattered to me. Mave was always the one thing I never truly lost. She was the one who got away, but in a way, I left her behind. Now, I don't know if I'll ever get another chance to make things right, but I won't stop hoping. Not for Mave, not for us, because some connections, no matter how broken they seem, never really fade away.